Outrage mounts as U.S. withdraws atrocity determination for Ethiopia, drawing criticism from rights groups. The recent decision by the US Treasury Department to backtrack on its determination of gross human rights violations in Ethiopia has sparked outrage among human rights advocates and international organizations. The move, based on a State Department assessment, has raised concerns about the U.S. government's commitment to upholding human rights and seeking justice for victims of atrocities in the war-torn region. In March, Secretary Antony Blinken made a landmark announcement, declaring that all parties involved in the conflict in northern Ethiopia had committed war crimes. The Ethiopian National Defense Forces, Eritrean Defense Forces, and Amhara forces were specifically implicated in crimes against humanity, including murder, rape, sexual violence, and persecution. The declaration was a crucial step towards holding accountable those responsible for the atrocities that have plagued the region. However, this week, the Treasury Department informed Congress of its revised stance, stating that it no longer believes the Ethiopian government is engaged in a pattern of gross violations of human rights. This change opens the door for the Treasury Department to engage with economic aid institutions, including the International Monetary Fund, on matters concerning Ethiopia. The decision has triggered a wave of criticism from prominent human rights organizations, which argue that the move overlooks the ongoing human rights abuses and sends a dangerous message that atrocity determinations carry minimal consequences. We're deeply concerned that the U.S. government no longer believes that gross violations of human rights are occurring in Ethiopia, expressed Sarah Yeager, Washington director at Human Rights Watch. Not only does the decision ignore the reality that grave human rights violations are continuing throughout the country, but it also sends a disastrous signal that U.S. atrocity determinations come with few consequences. Amnesty International USA also condemned the U.S. government shift in position, highlighting the lack of meaningful steps taken by Ethiopian authorities to address the crimes committed during the conflict in northern Ethiopia. Reports of ongoing violations and a failure to prioritize justice and accountability underscore the need for continued scrutiny and pressure on the Ethiopian government. The Biden administration purports to put human rights at the center of its foreign policy, yet their declaration that gross violations of human rights are no longer occurring flies in the face of this promise, stated Amanda Klossing, National Director for Government Relations and Advocacy at Amnesty International USA. To make such a determination before we've seen commitment to justice and accountability, and while reports of violations are ongoing, would be a politically expedient decision at the expense of survivors and victims. The withdrawal of the atrocity determination for Ethiopia comes in the wake of alarming reports from Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch documenting further violence and rights abuses. In April, Amnesty International called for the release of imprisoned journalists following a violent outbreak in the Amhara region that resulted in the tragic deaths of 2 humanitarian workers. In June, Human Rights Watch published findings of an ongoing ethnic cleansing campaign against Tigrayans in Ethiopia's western Tigray zone, including allegations of torture, arbitrary detention, and forced expulsion. As critics decry the U.S. government's decision, human rights advocates and international organizations stress the urgency of continued pressure on the Ethiopian government to address the human rights crisis, pursue justice, and ensure accountability for all parties involved.
አሁን ስንጀምር ማንም ሰው የሚያምን አልነበረም። አሁን ይታያል። ማንም ሰው አይቶ ሊያምን ይችላል። በሻይ ዘንድሮ የጀመርነው ቅድም ተባለው በሩዝ በፍሩት ከተማ ውስጥ ቬጂቴብል በሁሉም መንገድ ማየትን ውሃን ጉልበትን መጠቀም ከቻል ጠግበን ሌሎች ምናካፈል መሆናችንን በአጥረ ጊዜ ውስጥ ማሳየት እንችላለን። እንግዲህ ጅማሮች በጋራ ናቸው። ፈተናዎቻችን በዛው እንግዲህ ዘንድሮ ሰፊ ናቸው። ፈተናዎቻችን ብቻ ያጠነክሩናል ያስተምሩናል። በትንሹ እነሱን ይዘን 65% ውጤት ገደማ አረጋለን። እስካሁን እየመጣ ያለው በጣም ደስተኛ ነን። አምና ከነበረው ከ60% በላይ እድገት ይፈልጋል። ዛሬ በስንዴ ያለው እድገት በቡና ጋር ሻይም በሩዝ እንዲያግዙ በኦይል ሲድም ከተደገመ ግብርናው በጣም ከፍተኛ ደረጃ ያድጋል። ይሄ ደግሞ አጠቃላይ ያገቱ ውስጥ ታይመለከታቸው 1/3 ሼር ሀሳብ በእውቀት ግብርናው 1/3 ሼር ስላለው ግብርናው ከፍተኛ እድገት ካመጣ ሌላው እድገት ናቸው። ባየነው ጉዳይ የኢትዮጵያ መልካም የሚያስቡ ለኢትዮጵያ መልካም የሚተጉ ሰዎች እንኳን ደስ ያላችሁ። አመርቱ ውጤት እየመጣ ስለሆነ ሃርቨስት በኢትዮጵያ እድገት ውጤት የሚያዝን ሰዎች ደግሞ ያው ምንም ማድረግ አንችልም። ከስንዴው እናካፍላቸዋል።
የውሳኔው እኔን አይመለከተኝም እንድታደርሱልኝ። ከዛ በዘለለ ነቀዝ የበላው ስንዴ ነው የሚቀርብን። ቢቀርብን ይሻላል። ተባብረን ወገባችንን ጠበቅ አድርገን እንረስ። ለም መሬት አለን፣ አፈር አለን፣ ገና ያልሰራ ወጣት አለን። እንስራ። አገራችንን ከዚህ ውርደት እንታደጋት። ብዙ ቀልደውብናል። ባለፈው 100 ዓመት በእነሱ አዙሪት ውስጥ አገራችን ከርማለች ይበቃናል ይሄን አዙሪት ዘግተን ወደ አዲስ ምዕራፍ እንሻገር እግዚአብሔርም እንግዲህ ዝግትግት አርጎብናል ሊያግዘን ነው መሰለኝ በደንብ እንኳን ሁሉም ፊቱን አዞረብን እኔ በጣም ነው ማመሰግናችሁ ስለዚህ ተባብረን እንስራ አገራችን ከፍ ትላለች ከዚህ ውርደት እንወጣለን ይሄንን እንደ ታሪክ ነገ እንናገራለን ወደ ኋላ ውሃውም ይሞላል ስንዴ አይዟችሁ እኛ እናቀርባለን አትቸገሩ